Good morning. This is photos from underground, and I'd like to thank the viewer who sent me this photo. This has all the qualities we're looking for. It's very protean. There's a lot of curious things happening here. Some of the things, to note. Clearly this is a race. It's during the Olympics. So at the time in the early 19th century, when this looks like it was shot, there was clearly how can I say it? There was clearly they didn't quite patent down on what should be happening at the finish line. I see a lot of activity. It must be very confusing for the runner because, he's at this point he's at the end of his physical strength. Maybe there's still a little of endorphin high. He's probably seeing this race, like 50 feet above. He's looking down at his body. His his soul almost looks as if it's about to leave his body. And then, the confusing part is why are these two gentlemen running out and rushing around him? And then there's a third gentleman over here. It looks like he's ready to shake the runner's hand. So to me, that they didn't quite have the mechanics down here. I and I'm also sensing. Here is the chief clerk. He has a very important role, but usually it's kind of a desk role. You would expect him to be more of a clerk. You wouldn't expect a clerk, like if you saw a clerk in I don't know, a department store, you don't expect him to run out there, and especially the megaphone. So clearly, this is a showboating individual here. He's a clerk, but he's aspiring to more than just being the clerk. He obviously he's running out here. Maybe it looks like he's trying to protect the runner in some place. He's trying to run interference from this man trying to shake the runner's hand. But clearly, and look at the level of police. You have police. There's an officer, and there's an officer over in the far right hand part of the photo. So this is really one confusing finish line. So and also there's a lot of distrust here. I've never seen such, inspection of what's going on at that last moment. It isn't like we don't. Really, what are the possibilities, that are going to take place? He's going to continue to run, break the string, and the race is over. One thing I will note is I don't know anyone here who has a stopwatch. So, who's timing the race? The clerk is clearly out of position. He's over here. Not again. Probably the clerk. Here's what I'm thinking. What's happening with this clerk? He was probably a runner in his day. He never quite achieved the level of running that this gentleman has. This gentleman clearly is about to achieve the high point of his running career. He's first in this race. It's an Olympic event. This man, maybe he's pining himself to someday. So he may just there may be a little bit of envy here in this face. He's not really. What is he watching? I don't know where his eyes are. He's probably wants to kind of break the finish line for the runner, to just kind of say, I really won. Maybe I won the race. That's some of my first impressions. There's a lot of confusing things happening here. But if you look at, I guess the other things is I don't know a lot about races back then. Maybe this guy, when people ran races, it clearly is a public moment. But you also have a lot of people with private agendas, and maybe he's running the race. But maybe you see the officers here. Maybe this was a popular thing to do. You run the race, and maybe he was terrorizing the villagers just earlier, like during the race. It's a lot of opportunity there, especially if you're a fast runner. You can do a lot of damage. You're running through these towns unfettered. You have free reign. This was a very restricted society back then. You didn't just go from place to place. People would be checking your papers. But to have a race set up, it gives this gentleman a lot of freedom, and he could have been um, there could have been a lot of monkey business going on, and this man. That's why these people here are at the end to kind of control him, contain him. It's not clear. Apprehend him. He's a fast, but he's. I mean, this is the end of the race, so he probably doesn't have a lot of energy left. So they're thinking, well, we can contain him. Um, let's, maybe there's going to be an interrogation at the end of the race to talk about some of the things. I mean, maybe there was a jewelry heist. I do see that. I'm not quite sure what this is, but maybe he's concealing something he had taken from one of the villagers. Some other things that I just noticed, like I was really wondering where, like no one's holding water here. Usually at a race, you see people giving the runner water. Um, I started thinking about that. At the end of a race, a runner is very vulnerable. I mean, he has no strength. He's really at the mercy of all of these individuals. And I'm sure back then they probably, there's a lot of um, lawlessness in these times. There was a lot of, it's outright kidnapping or abductions. And if you look at the runner at the end of the race, he would be very vulnerable. Like, let's say he would have run over and kind of sit down, after, shake this gentleman's hand, and then sit down, catching his breath. He's very vulnerable to someone running over to him with a gunny sack, putting it over his head, and a couple hours later he's going to wake up at sea. Maybe a couple 100 miles out at sea. Um, that probably happened a lot. It probably made for some pretty strange moments on the victory stand where, maybe the first runner, was missing. You have the second and third, and maybe even some cases they lose two of them. It just depends on how astute the chief clerk is to this kind of um, rascalry activity at the end of these kind of rogues at the end of the finish line, waiting to take advantage of the runners. Because clearly, he would be a good, at sea. He would probably be pretty good. It looks like he has his sea legs. He's, he has endurance because he was in a race. I don't think this was a sprint. This looks like it was a long race. Um, So I think those are important things. The other things I was thinking about was, it just also may have been very skeptical times, and people were just, a lot of runners, like I'm saying, were maybe not the highest class citizens. Maybe there was a lot of, right now we have runners, and there's all these scandals about steroids. But back then, I mean, I don't know what the scandals were, but clearly.